Hello and welcome to the information session for the On-Road Transportation Decarbonization Call for Proposals under the Energy Innovation Program. This session is presented by Natural Resources Canada's Office of Energy Research and Development. Today's session aims to provide an overview of the applicant's guide and the application process for this funding opportunity. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the Natural Resources Canada head office in Ottawa is located on the unceded ancestral territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. While we meet today on a virtual platform from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples that call this nation home. In recognition that many of the attendees of today's session are also tuning in from unceded territories across the country, we encourage thoughtful reflection of the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I would first like to address a couple of housekeeping items. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions via the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. Questions will be answered at the end of the session. Please note that questions will be visible to everyone participating in the call. However, you may submit them anonymously via Zoom. Please also note that project-specific questions will not be answered during this presentation, and that all attendees will be emailed the presentation deck and a link to a recording of the information session. If you experience any technical difficulties throughout the presentation, please email the program mailbox on screen. We will be monitoring it throughout the session. On the agenda today is an overview of the Energy Innovation Program and the On-Road Transportation Decarbonization Call, an overview of the applicant's guide and the expression of interest form, then a description of the application process, and we will highlight some program expectations for projects that are selected for funding, and we will wrap up with a Q&A. This funding call is managed by the Office of Energy Research and Development, also known as OERD, which leads the Government of Canada's efforts in delivering energy research, development, and demonstration funding. The call falls under the Energy Innovation Program, which is the main funding program of the OERD. Other federal departments, such as Transport Canada and Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, also fund programs related to clean transportation. The Energy Innovation Program, which was first announced in Budget 2019, supports Canada's energy transition by advancing pre-commercial technologies and innovations that decarbonize energy production and use. The program has a funding base of $70 million per year, with funding delivered through multiple targeted calls across various technology areas, as well as other unique program streams and initiatives. The call aims to fund R&D projects and demonstration projects that will help decarbonize the transportation sector. The call seeks to support projects that address technical and market innovation barriers in Canada in two distinct focus areas. Focus Area 1 will see projects related to low and zero emission on-road medium and heavy-duty vehicles, while Focus Area 2 will see projects related to infrastructure supporting on-road zero-emission vehicles and overall transportation system efficiency. Both R&D projects and demonstration projects are eligible to be funded under Focus Area 1 and Focus Area 2, subject to some restrictions that we will discuss later during this information session. Please note that in the application form, you will be required to specify your project's focus area 1 or 2 and your project type, R&D or demonstration. On screen, you can see examples of project scopes that are not eligible for this call. These include purchase of commercially available vehicles or the associated infrastructure, battery supply chain, manufacturing or inside the cell components, off-road vehicles or their supporting infrastructure, energy storage, air, rail, or marine modes of transportation or their supporting infrastructure, and asset-agnostic grid-side solutions, such as distributed energy resource management systems, virtual power plant models, electricity rate trials, or other initiatives. However, note that Vehicle to Everything, V2X, projects that focus on the functionality of the vehicle or charger, but not the functionality of the grid connected to it, are eligible. On screen, you'll see a list of eligible applicants for the program. As you can see, eligibility for the call is quite broad, and most legal entities validly incorporated or registered in Canada are eligible, as well as all levels of government other than federal. On screen, you can see a list of the priorities for Focus Area 1, low and zero emission on-road MHDVs. To be eligible under Focus Area 1, projects must align with at least one of the priorities identified. These include: reduce the cost-performance ratio of electrical powertrain components outside the battery cells. Demonstrate novel use cases of battery electric on-road MHDVs for demonstration projects only. Reduce the cost-performance ratio of hydrogen fuel cell technologies for on-road heavy-duty vehicles. Demonstrate novel use cases of hydrogen fuel cell technologies for on-road HDVs for demonstration projects only. Reduce GHG emissions of on-road internal combustion engine HDVs through hybridization, heat harvesting, or vehicle optimization for low-carbon fuels, or improve the energy efficiency of on-road MHDVs through lightweighting by using advanced materials. Within each priority, project eligibility is also determined by the vehicle platform and vehicle segment category. Before applying, ensure that your project is aligned with the eligibility criteria with respect to priority, vehicle platform, and vehicle segment. An example of project eligibility under Focus Area 1, taken from the applicant's guide, is illustrated here. As you can see in the table, projects that address priority A and priority B must focus on battery-powered vehicles classified as MHDVs in classes 2B to 8. Conversely, projects that address priority C and priority D must focus on hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that are classified as HDV Class 8. On screen, you can see a list of the priorities for Focus Area 2, infrastructure supporting zero-emission on-road vehicles and overall transportation system efficiency. To be eligible under Focus Area 2, projects must align with at least one of the priorities identified. These include affordable charging solutions for multi-unit residential buildings, dwellings that lack access to a driveway or a garage, or residential rental properties, improve uptake of zero-emission transportation technologies and required infrastructure in rural, remote, and northern communities, charging or refueling solutions addressing barriers that are specific to zero-emission fleets and or to zero-emission MHDVs, such as placement, power requirements, and grid impact, or improve transportation system energy efficiency by developing or demonstrating innovative infrastructure solutions. Unlike in Focus Area 1, there are no priorities in Focus Area 2 that are reserved only for demonstration or only for R&D activities. That is, R&D or demonstration activities are permitted under each priority in Focus Area 2. Like Focus Area 1, however, project eligibility is again determined by the vehicle platform and the vehicle segment category. Another example of project eligibility, which is again taken from the applicant's guide, is illustrated here, this time for Focus Area 2. For Focus Area 2, projects that address priority A must focus on battery-powered vehicles that are classified as light-duty vehicles. Projects that address priority B, alternatively, must focus on battery-powered or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that are classified as light-duty vehicles or any class of medium and heavy-duty vehicles. Now that we have covered the call's focus areas and priorities, let's zoom out and look at the two eligible project types. As mentioned earlier, you will be required to classify your project type as either R&D or demonstration in your submission. You can find the full list of eligible R&D project activities in the applicant's guide. Projects that primarily focus on developing or enhancing codes and standards are not eligible. However, projects that primarily focus on eligible R&D activities and also include elements that support developing or enhancing codes and standards will be eligible. The submission for such project should fully outline the elements and projected outcomes related to the codes and standards. Note that R&D projects are required to have a current technology readiness level of at least 3. Although there is some judgment required when assessing technology readiness level, please ensure that your project's current TRL falls to at least this level and refer to Appendix A of the applicant's guide for TRL definitions. You can also find a full list of eligible demonstration project activities in the applicant's guide. Note that front-end engineering designs are eligible under this call only if they are leading to a demonstration under the same proposed project. The submission must clearly outline the critical path between the feed and the demonstration phases of the project, including the go, no-go decision points and the risk management strategy. Demonstration projects are required to have a current TRL of at least 5. Unlike R&D project, there is an additional requirement for demonstration to achieve a TRL of at least 8 by the end of the project. Again, it is your responsibility to properly assess and justify the project's current and end TRL, and you should refer to Appendix A of the applicant's guide for TRL's definitions. Now that we've discussed eligible project activities, this slide provides a list of ineligible project activities. Note that projects that have the primary outputs or activities shown on this slide are not eligible. These include capacity building and training, assessments or characterization studies including data compilations and syntheses, the use of existing software, models, or tools to run scenarios or identify innovation needs, and reviewing evidence supporting existing codes and standards or adopting international codes and standards for Canada. However, these activities or outputs could be included as tasks that lead to the development or demonstration of new science and technology tools, technologies, or systems, acknowledging the preceding descriptions of eligible activities for R&D and demonstration projects. On screen, you can see the funding available for the call. All projects will be funded over a period of up to 5 years starting on or after April 1st, 2024. For R&D projects, the program can provide a contribution of $500,000 up to $1.5 million, covering a maximum of 75% of total project costs. For demonstration projects, the program can provide a contribution of $1 million up to $5 million, covering a maximum of 50% of total project costs. For Indigenous applicants only, the program can cover up to 100% of total project costs, subject to the same maximum dollar amounts for both project types. Please note that stacking of funding, that is, the total government support for a project, will be supported to a maximum of 100% of eligible expenditures. The link to the applicant portal is noted on screen and can also be accessed through the applicant's guide. To start an application, you'll be required to register or sign in using a GC key or sign in through your bank. From the applicant's guide, you can download the user guide to the applicant portal. The guide will help you navigate the portal and includes instructions on how to use its main functions, such as the Manage Collaborators function, which allows you to manage who can edit your application. On screen, you can see a list of the pages and sections of the expression of interest that you will have access to once you open a new application on the applicant portal. We will take a closer look at the evaluated sections on the next slide, but it's important to note that all sections are important, even the ones that are not evaluated, as they may still be used to assess the eligibility of your project. The idea and declarations pages will both be discussed later during this information session. The project details page is where you will find all the evaluated sections of the form except the one on partner organizations and key team members, which you will find on the applicant details page. On screen, you can see the points allocated to each section. Note the difference between R&D and demonstration for some of the sections. All the evaluated questions are included in Appendix D of the applicant's guide, should you want to read them prior to opening an application on the portal. When filling out your application, you will sometimes see an error message appear if you enter a value that is either in the wrong format or outside of the eligible range. However, the sections shown on this slide have eligible values or ranges of values that are nuanced beyond the specifics of your project. For those sections, pay special attention to the guiding text, as entering an ineligible combination of values won't necessarily trigger an error message that will prevent you from submitting, but it will make your submission ineligible. As shown on this slide, those sections include alignment of vehicle platform, segment, and priority, where you are responsible for following the guidelines outlined in the focus area priority tables in the applicant's guide, expected completion date, where you are responsible for entering a date that is 5 years or less after your project start date, funding requested, where based on your project type, you are responsible for requesting an amount that is within the eligible range, which is $500,000 to $1.5 million for R&D projects and $1 to $5 million for demonstration projects. And percent funding requested, where based on your project type, applicant type, and total project cost, you are responsible for making sure that the percent funding requested does not exceed the maximum value, which is 75% of total project costs for R&D projects and 50% for demonstration projects. Indigenous applicants may request up to 100% funding for both project types. On screen, you can see a list of additional reminders to be mindful of when completing your application. First, pay close attention to the character limits, especially when copying and pasting from another document, as the text boxes in the form will automatically cut off any additional text beyond the character limit. Second, note that with regard to IP and knowledge products, you can have one or the other or both. Third, a reminder that partner organizations and key team member sections are scored with a total value of 15 points. Note that uploading team member CVs is not mandatory, but could be considered during project review. Fourth, for partner organizations, remember that letters of support are required if you indicate that partnership is confirmed. And finally, when you're ready to submit your application, click Review and Submit, review errors if any, and click Submit. Don't forget to click Submit. The second to last page of the application form is on Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, IDEA. This page will have questions about IDEA plans and asks if your organization has made any public commitments to IDEA. While voluntary, your responses may be considered during the selection process. The information in this section will be used to track progress on workforce diversity and may inform future program and policy development. Applicants are asked to confirm details of their operations and business details on the declarations page of the application form, including through the declaration on this slide, which reads, "My organization does not conduct business dealings in any country against which Canada has imposed economic sanctions under the United Nations Act, Special Economic Measures Act, or the Justice for Victims of Foreign Corrupt Officials, known as the Sergei Magnitsky Law." Please note that business dealings in a country on this list, which includes China, does not automatically disqualify you from funding. Sanctions are often applied to specific organizations rather than the country itself. If this declaration is left unchecked, you will be contacted by a representative from OERD for additional information that may impact the eligibility of your application. On screen is an illustration of the expression of interest and full project proposal phases of the application process. The approximate timeline for each phase is also included. This is a competitive process. Projects will be evaluated according to the scoring outlined in the application form, and projects that best fit our criteria will be selected to submit full project proposals. The full project proposal will ask for much more detailed information about the project and will be reviewed and evaluated by the Technical Review Committee. Another important step in the process is the beginning of due diligence. This marks the selection of your project, but not a commitment of funding on Enercan's behalf. For now, the most important thing on screen is the expression of interest due date, which is 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on July 20th, 2023, meaning 2:59 a.m. on July 21st Eastern Time. Although this is still a ways away, we will now provide a brief description of the steps of our due diligence process. Please note that this will only be relevant for those that are conditionally selected for funding following the full project proposal phase. Firstly, being conditionally selected for funding does not constitute a commitment of funding from NRCan. That only occurs once a contribution agreement has been signed by NRCan and the proponent after successfully completing the due diligence phase. Now, for due diligence, NRCan's process covers 3 areas: financial, regulatory, and technical. Financial due diligence requires due diligence of your budget. This includes the applicant providing evidence that they can finance their portion of the project and have secured other sources of funding. Also, please note that your project may be selected for a third-party financial audit to evaluate financial stability. This is done on a case-by-case basis. Regulatory due diligence consists of NRCan determining if the project is carried out on federal lands and whether environmental assessment and Indigenous consultation is required. This is an internal process. Finally, technical due diligence will consist of a review of the project's statement of work and the performance of an internal risk assessment. This is largely an internal process, but some questions for the proponent may arise. Provided that your project successfully completes our due diligence process, the project team will generate a draft contribution agreement and schedules based on the due diligence budget and statement of work. Your organization will be sent the draft contribution agreement and schedules for your review. Finally, once the project team and proponents agree to the content of the contribution agreement and schedules, the package is ready for approvals. Approvals consist of primarily internal approvals on our end, the proponent's signatures, and the final signature by the Assistant Deputy Minister marking a finalized contribution agreement. Once a contribution agreement has been signed and a project has begun, the program has various reporting requirements. We have broadly divided the required reports into 3 sections: quarterly and annual reports, completion reports, and post-completion follow-up. Quarterly and annual reports may be a bit of a misnomer because reporting frequency is specified in your contribution agreement, but it will consist of financial claims, generally quarterly, and year-end reports, annually alongside the 4th quarter claim. The completion report will mark the official end of your project. This is to be submitted once all project activities as set out in Schedule A are complete and a standard holdback is tied to the submission of the completion report. The post-completion follow-up will happen annually for 5 years after the anniversary of the project completion. We often receive questions about what funding model the program uses, so we want to clarify today that the program uses a reimbursement model. This means that expenditures must be incurred and paid for by the proponent in order to be reimbursed by the program. There is also a standard holdback applied to each claim, normally 10%. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. We will now move on to the live Q&A portion of the information session, but if you have any questions that you would rather ask by email or after the Q&A, please send them to the address on screen. On screen you can also see the anticipated timelines for this call. You can also find this in the applicant's guide, but the most important date on this slide is the due date for your expression of interest. All expressions of interest are due by 11:59 Pacific time on July 20th, 2023.